Oh, hey there. I feel like queer time and POC time still exists though, even though we have like no excuse to not be on time these days. I'm still late to Zoom meetings, even though like I'm on the laptop. So, queer time and POC time is just it's just within us. We can't help it. So, thanks for being on time. Wait, what? It's a Sunday. Yeah, we're still not there with the days of the week. I've been picking up some British Sign Language, some BSL. So I've learned Ramadan Mubarak. I'm going to show you. So Ramadan, you just take your hand from your left side of your mouth to your right. Ramadan, Ramadan, and Mubarak. You have your hands in like kind of a pinch position, and from your chest you go outwards. Mubarak, Ramadan Mubarak, and enjoy today. So I hope you have a good time today with me. Hello again to everyone tuning in on Instagram Live, or if you're watching this back on YouTube or Instagram, then hello. This theme, self-love and self-hate, came from one of my followers, Hero Auntie, who suggested the theme of self-hate, how language fails. And we had a few message exchanges, and they talked about self-care being a full-time job and how self-care is more just taking care of myself, which I can really relate to, and I really agree with that. I think that self-care sometimes is like branded as something special, like as a luxury, but actually it's like something that is completely absolutely essential for me and something I need to do like all the time. I can't just kind of schedule in like an hour of self-care. It's like no, constant needs and caring needs to happen. I like this idea of that it's a full-time job. If we think of it as a full-time job, then we need cover, we need employee benefits, we need annual leave from taking care of ourselves, we need all the things that come with having a job, right? So just going back to the conversation around language. So my first question I'm going to answer is, how does language fail us? And language totally does fail us around self-care when we do actually need care from our community sometimes and many others. There's a quote by Nikita Valerio, who on Instagram is Poetics in Action, who said, "Shouting self-care at people who actually need community care is how we fail people." Let me know what you think of that. That really spoke to me. We need that almost now more than ever as well, community care. In my last Instagram live, I talked about how I believe that everyone has the power within them, but it's much more complicated than that, because we might have that, but how do we realize that, and how can we feel powerful when the language that we're using is so disempowering? I think we have to find the language that works for us around self-care. Maybe think of self-care as like an umbrella term instead, and there's loads of different things that come under it. Personally, does self-care work for me? No, not really. I think every day I have to remind myself of the things that I'm actively doing to look after myself, because I'm really hard on myself, and I'm just realizing this recently as well. This isn't something I've worked on for like 5 years. It's like 5 months, 5 weeks even. I remember talking to a friend, I was just exhausted, and I just felt like I wasn't doing anything, and I was run down and depleted, and she suggested writing a list of all the things I'm actually doing in the day, because I was like, I've done nothing today. And then I had written this list, and it was quite a long list of all these chores I was doing, all these tasks and activities I was doing to look after my home, look after my house, look after my body, look after my mental health, look after my emotions, and give me some pleasure and joy in the day. And I was like, wow, like I really can't see this. So I need those reminders every day. I still write lists about just for me, just the things that I'm actually doing, because I forget that the little things I'm doing, which I've already maybe do as normal or like blindly, I'm actually looking after myself, and that's important for me to realize. I'm caring for myself, like I am, and that's good. I think also there is a fine line between self-care and self-harm for me personally. And I'm thinking mostly about substances, and when I say substances, I'm talking about alcohol and nicotine and all drugs. They're all substances and drugs to me, and exercise as well can be. These things can be part of self-care and joy and pleasure and release, but there's a really fine line when that turns into self-harm and becomes destructive for me. And when do I stop caring for myself and when do I start destroying myself? I don't know. It's really hard to keep an eye on that fine line, especially when I've got my own internalized things where the line to me is kind of like, oh well, it's a bit, it's a pencil line. I could just rub it out and draw another line, or there are a few different lines, and I can talk myself into thinking something is caring for myself when actually it's still harming myself. Which and those are ongoing conversations and frustrations with myself, and every different context brings different conversations around that. And I'm thinking about being in kind of lockdown, and my self-care and self-harm feels quite separate right now. But when I go back out into the world, or start engaging in like in socializing, that sounded really technical, engaging in socializing, when I start having fun with my friends, and maybe partying and all that stuff, enjoying food, and maybe even stuff around sex and intimacy, then I'm going to have to start thinking about that fine line again between self-care and self-harm. Yeah, it is hard. It is hard. The next question I got was, how do you maintain your emotional hygiene? This question came from one of my followers called Sick Noir, and we had a small discussion around emotional hygiene as well. Let me know what you think about emotional hygiene as well, if you've heard of that, because I hadn't heard of that before. This Sick Noir says it visualizes what I'm doing, cleaning, tidying, stuff that's piling up inside of me. I asked him if I could share this really useful visual metaphor for emotional hygiene. I thought that might be helpful to some people as well. So emotional hygiene is being mindful of our psychological health, adopting to daily habits to monitor or address psychological wounds. It's a bit clinical. It's very practical, I think. Like, I'm more familiar with sleep hygiene, which is all about kind of practical steps, and I found that useful because I could see really easily what I can do to get a better sleep, for example. With emotional hygiene, I think it's a bit harder to go through those practical steps for me to find out how I can have like better emotions or a better well-being. So it's again like an umbrella term, which can be useful, but I think for me it misses like those nuances of like the individual and our context as well. And I'm going to come with like my psychotherapist hat on, where I'm just like thinking, well, what's going on to make your emotional hygiene difficult or managing your well-being difficult, instead of just kind of having like a good emotional hygiene. My other contention with this kind of language around hygiene or clean is the kind of opposite, and the dichotomies we can set up around that, where if something is hygienic, it's either hygienic or unhygienic. If something is clean, then it can also be dirty or unclean, and that's not really... That can kind of, I don't know, it can kind of leave me feeling a bit rubbish about they're not having good emotional hygiene or something like that, which I don't think is true, and it's just not that simple, and not fair to think of us or our emotions or anything as being like unclean or dirty or something. Yeah. But to answer the question, how do I maintain my emotional hygiene? I think it is just those everyday reminders. I journal a lot. I just write whenever I can. I don't put a goal or limit on that either. Like, sometimes it's just like one line in my phone, or other times it's like 2 hours in my notebook or my journal. And just really trying to balance the practical, emotional, physical, mental needs that I have, and just kind of watching them all shift as well. Our next question is, what were your first steps to self-love and becoming the true version of yourself? I will say I'm still working on it. Really, really still working on it. Becoming the true version of myself. Yeah, I don't think I'll ever get there, you know. But at the same time, it's also not my goal. To know the true version of myself. Maybe like to know the truer version of myself, or to be true to myself. A word that I use a lot, which can sound kind of pretentious, but I really like it, is authenticity. Most things I'm doing is to strive to be as authentic as I can be, even when I don't know what that is. The first steps for me would be maybe just grappling with my own self-hate, and seeing them as a product of my internalized oppressions, and also just trying to figure out where that came from. Like, my identity has changed a lot over the years. How I've been read, how I've been socialized, how I've been perceived, how I'm interacted with, and all the messages I get about how valuable or how I'm heard and all that stuff. It all forms these kinds of internalized messages and impressions about myself, which really feeds into my self-hate, which is really hard when the messages that I had about being a girl, I still have when I'm not a girl anymore. It's not always difficult to be myself, but I think it's difficult to like know myself, especially away from those judgments and values and messages, away from the gaze, and that's GAZE, not GAYS. There's nothing wrong with the gaze, not being like low-key homophobic. It's And something interesting I've noticed about being in lockdown is that I'm not around the gays. Like, actually, I'm in my house and I'm mostly by myself, and it's pretty easy to just be myself here. But who is that? I'm figuring that out. Trying to be happy and proud of and love who you are, as well as people like me or marginalized folks, is also really hard. We have to overcome a lot more, and we also don't know what we have to overcome. And those steps to self-love are going to be very different to somebody else who is in a more privileged position, and our own self-love is going to look different to others as well. Yeah, sorry, I'm fasting today, so I don't realize how tired I am until I actually start talking, and then I'm like, oh yes, Ramadan brain, okay. So thanks for your patience. Next question is, how has being surrounded by community and LGBT friends impacted your self-care and love? Which is a really nice question. I've realised that I don't receive care very easily. And in many roles in my life, I think like historically, I've always been the carer, whether that's, support work or counselling work or being a carer. I just fall into that. So the impact that my friends and my community have had on me is that they've shown me how to step out of that role after they've seen me in that role for a long time. They've forced me to stop it. Like, sometimes it does come to like very like blunt interactions with friends who are just like, no, like, just stop it, like, sit down, you're not getting up to do this, or no, I hope you didn't do that, or like, no, you're not taking this on, I'm going to take this on, which I really need, because it's so intrinsic in me. And it's not a bad thing. I think it's just, I need to know when it comes at a detriment to myself, caring for others so much. Friends have been really important to do that, and we have those interactions a lot, and they make me feel safe to have those conversations, and those feelings about the guilt and insecurities that come from receiving care and self-caring and self-loving and receiving love, which is really, really important. I think that is a really important part of friendship and community for me. Next question I got: when is hate a good thing, if ever? When I think about hate, I hear this line from a song in my head: hate is a strong word, but I really, really, really don't like you. which is a song called Hate by the Plain White T's. Shout out if you know that song. I know I'm not a singer also, so if you didn't get the song, it's probably not even your fault. I'm not good at singing. But yeah, hate is a strong word. And I think my dad actually told me this when I was a kid. He Yeah, I think when I was a kid, I was like, oh, I hate this, and I hate maths, and I hate the color blue, and so he would say like, hate's a really a strong word. Don't say that, you dislike something, and that kind of stuck with me. I don't think hate is a good thing, but it doesn't stop us from feeling it. um, I think it's really hard to move past hate. I've definitely had that journey, especially when it comes to like hating white people or hating people who oppress me. That, yeah, and we can easily internalize hate as well, that we feel for other people, or that we receive through messages. Again, kind of what I've talked about already, and microaggressions, which can be really subtle, but come from those nuances of hate. If you're thinking about hate, or when I'm thinking about hate, I try to interrogate what it is that I hate. Like, for example, if it's something I hate about my body, what is it about this part that I hate about it? And it will tell me something about myself, usually something I'm afraid of finding out, or usually something I'm afraid of becoming, whether that part is gendered or something like that. I don't know. I'm not, I'm just keeping a bit to myself as well. And I think also hate is a really nice veil sometimes for nice. Hate isn't nice, but hate can be a veil for shame and anger as well, which are really tricky emotions as well. Approach this with caution, and some kindness as well. It's these are really like deep stuck difficult feelings. The questions that I've asked myself before are whether my hate comes from a defensive or wounded or scared place. And then I just try and find a way that I can be vulnerable with myself or with somebody else, and explore that where I feel safe to do so. The other thing that comes up for me is remembering that anger is not always hateful, and I like to make this distinction that anger is not always hate, and there is always a place for righteous anger, and anger can still be valid. But just remembering when that becomes directed at ourselves, that can be harmful too. Somebody says, for me, hate often comes from places I feel trapped or stuck. That's really hard, isn't it? When it feels like also something's out of our control. But yeah, this is how I feel about hate. But I know it means different things for everyone. I just hope that you can also kind of remedy that with something else, not just try and totally cancel it out, because like I said, it's hard to stop ourselves from feeling something. The next question I have is, how do you keep boundaries when it's hard because you love someone and don't want to hurt them? So just to kind of frame this, I'm not going to be talking about unsafe relationships and coercive dynamics. Abuse is a very different conversation to this question, so I think this sounds like it's a question about like keeping boundaries within a loving relationship, whatever kind of relationship that is. You don't want to hurt someone. First of all, go with your gut reaction or your heart reaction. Where are you in all of this when we're talking about boundaries? Whose boundaries are kept and whose boundaries are knocked down? And if you don't want to hurt someone, what about your own hurt that you might be feeling? I think if you love each other, then your hurt will also matter to the other person. And when we ask questions like this, I also wonder, is the other person or other people asking themselves the same question? Are they also thinking about our needs in the same way? When it comes to keeping boundaries, start with your needs. What do you need? Then we can kind of pick out our boundaries. And I know, as I said, that figuring out what we need is not always easy. And I'm not expecting that to just be like, oh, really simple, like, what do I need? Oh, I need a glass of water. It's like, when it comes to emotions, it's much more difficult. Within relationships, I think keep boundaries around reasonable and fair requests. When it comes to things like jealousy and control, it's really easy to ask for like boundaries, which is like, well, I don't want you to talk to this person and never go to this place ever again. But it's not about boundaries aren't about control. It's about making us feel safe and secure and loved and sexy and attractive and desired. And it's okay to also have jealousy as well. I don't think that's something. I think jealousy is a part of it's a part of relationships as well. Communication and conversation, I think, are the really important parts to this as well. Just having a conversation about this instead of it just being like, I have a question and I need an answer, and it's very like existing outside of a relationship. Next question. How do you approach your oppressors/family in a loving way when trying to come out? This is a really good question. And first I would just say this is just for people who are trying to come out. I think, we forget that not everyone wants to come out or can come out. So just kind of bear that in mind. And we all have different relationships to family. What family is to us is completely different. And whether that is the same as our oppressors is also unique to us as well. And again, this can change over time, and I think will continue to change. For me anyway, my approaches to family, by approaches I mean my love and dislikes, and not like anti-love, like also changes over time. Approach yourself first. What do you need when you're trying to come out? What do you need to hear? What do you need to hear back? What do you need to feel? And then think about what will that do to you if that doesn't happen. Like it could be nothing changes, it could be everything changes. So just thinking about what is the effects of it not happening, and then asking yourself if you need that. I'm like thinking about this word oppressors, like if these are people oppressing you, do you need that? Is there another place you can find those needs, get those needs met? Can you find a way around it? I feel like these are kind of like fluffy answers, but these are really broad answers. Take what you want from it. I'm really big on being transparent about these conversations. So like being open with your family or oppressors about these conversations, saying like, I'm trying to do this in a loving way. I want to love you, and oppression makes it hard, and this is why. And the most important thing, I think, is compassion for others and compassion for yourself. Again, that is not easy. It's so much easier to say that. In family, actually, it's I don't know. I'm thinking about myself, and I try and hold compassion for family members, but then I'm also a child, and I'm also a sibling, and I want compassion back. Like I want to have a little bit of a tantrum, and I can't just completely pull myself apart from this family dynamic. So yeah, remembering that I deserve care, and I deserve to be treated like a child still, and a sibling and a family member as well, not just like a person who's coming out for some reason, yeah, that really helps me. So the last question I have from my lovely followers is, how can you use self-care to promote healthier masculinities? I personally love questions about masculinity and having space to talk about that, so thank you. I don't think I do it enough or have it enough. So this is great, and it's such a nice way to frame that within self-care as well. So the first thing I would say is to understand patriarchy, misogyny, and feminism. Understand that sexism hurts us all, no matter what our gender identity, no matter what our gender expression. Sexism puts limits and values and constraints on all of these different facets of us. I would say understand that we're in a world that panders to masculine egos. Society panders to my masculine ego, my masculinities. It's not my fault, but I do have a part to play because I look the part or because I sound the part, and my masculinity is only toxic if I let it be. and I think it's very easy for my masculinity to become toxic because, like I said, this society will pander to it, and affirm toxic masculinity and overlook it and apologize for it and things like that. I remember I did a talk, it must be like 3 years ago, about masculinity, and I talked about how we define masculinity, and how masculinity, I think, sometimes is defined by oppression, and who it oppresses. And I think that feels kind of weak, which is no surprise when we say things like, well, when we know that masculinity is so fragile, it's because it can be quite weak sometimes. So going back to the question, how can we use self-care to promote healthier masculinities? How would you define masculinities? And this also just maybe is worth saying. This is a question for people of all genders, and no genders. Masculinities applies to anyone who feels like they have it. It's not. It doesn't belong to men, is what I'm trying to say, really. So when I ask myself about how I feel about being masculine, it's really tricky. I don't always like being masculine, and I feel quite negatively about my own masculinity. Yeah, I actually feel really ashamed of my masculinity, and I'm scared of it sometimes, and I run away from it. And I think, and well, I know where that comes from. That comes from my own experience of misogyny and sexism and the patriarchy. I have to be honest with how I feel about being masculine, and knowing where that comes from is a really important first step to understanding how I can then kind of promote a healthy masculinity for myself. And I think maybe I need to first define masculinity for myself, because just from what I've said, I've just defined it as oppressive, and as, in my mind, as violent, as harmful, as negative, as scary, as threatening. But those that's not masculinity. That isn't actually. That's not how I want my masculinity to be defined. That's not how I want to define masculinity. I think there are so many ways I can affirm myself as masculine without it being kind of stemming from male privilege or oppression. I think it can be really easy for me to affirm my masculine self from male privilege. Like, well done, Sabah, you took up space, or you were noticed, or you were complimented, and you were strong, you were seen, you were heard. But actually, like, how much of that was just because I benefit from male privilege, and I am allowed to take up space, and I can take up space, and I'm always noticed, I'm always heard. Beauty standards are lower for me. I'm seen as strong, and all these things. I want to affirm myself in ways that affirm my masculinity in ways that aren't from there. That would also redefine my masculinity as being more and better and better, and for me, like, and stronger, and I mean stronger beyond physical strength. Just more like robust and solid and grounding. I want to affirm myself as masculine whilst being emotional and vulnerable and giving, especially to people who aren't masculine, to feminine people, to women. I want to broaden masculinity outside of gender stereotypes, and not think about masculinity as this like one thing. And those small affirmations are how I think I can promote a healthier masculinity in myself. And I guess, yeah, healthier, not toxic, healthier, loving, healthier, giving, to others and to myself. Yeah. I'm not often that vulnerable about what masculinity feels like to me personally, because because I'm often just talking about masculine as a privilege and male privilege. So yeah, this has been nice. Thank you for listening. Thank you for all the hearts. Got a comment from someone. If you can, I'd love some advice on how to, even in small ways, to feel good in myself as I am when the people I'm around don't see me as I am. Thank you, Astro Casper, for that. Thank you for that question. So, something I often say to people who are like trying to find a space where they can feel good in themselves is, well, maybe it just starts with finding a space where you can feel yourself. Maybe feeling good sometimes can put quite a bit of pressure. Like, oh, I'm gonna do this thing for myself, and I'm gonna feel good about it at the end of it. I don't know. Maybe there's something like that at play. I think thinking about loads of different ways in which we can have space as well. So like beyond like a physical space, sometimes we can't have that physical space to feel good about ourselves. Sometimes it's just like a space that exists in a conversation between somebody else. Sometimes it's a space on like a blank page on my laptop, or conversation boxes online on social media. It could be something like it could be anything like that. It could just be like a space like in yourself. I'm just going to go back to the question because I do this really great habit of steering off. Yeah. So I'm reading. Especially when the people you're around don't see me as. Especially when the people I'm around don't see me as I am. I think those spaces and redefining what that space might look like is really important to make sure you have that space away from people who don't see you as who you are. I've talked about space a lot, but you've just said generally some advice. I think just take your time with it, with feeling good about yourself. Maybe just think about it as more like of a spectrum, or like different kind of ways or stages you can feel good about yourself. Like, yeah, I'm just thinking about when I want to feel good about myself, and I'm very easy to just cross the whole day out and just be like, today was rubbish. I feel terrible, and nothing's going to feel better. Today, this week has just been bad. But instead of just thinking about it in this kind of whole ways, just actually just even crossing out like the morning when I've just had like a bad morning, or I've just done something to feel bad about myself, or someone's made me feel someone's hurt me. I just cross out like that part of the day, and then kind of try and look at the rest of the day as like something new and different, and just giving myself a bit more time to just kind of to sulk and be sad, and tend to my wounds, and grieve, or whatever that is, and just give myself that space, but then give myself a chance to kind of bounce off it as well. I hope that helped. That was a bit of a rambly answer. Someone's written, I love everything you're saying. I'm wondering if there's a framework that we can work towards that reshaped masculinity as something that isn't left damaging. That isn't damaging. I'm just making up words now, everyone. I wonder if there is a framework for reshaping masculinity as something that isn't damaging. I would say that there are frameworks out there, and that feminism is probably there is a great framework for this. Intersectional feminism that is written from and by people of different gender identities, different backgrounds, different abilities, different experiences, different types of kind of socioeconomic, immigration, citizenship statuses. There's just a fly in my face. I think that these frameworks are out there, and we just need to, we masculine people, I'm speaking about myself as well, just need to use them. I'm sure there are men and masculine people who have written about this, but I'm not listening to them. No, I'm just kidding. As a follow-up, someone said, I wonder if there are specific qualities from masculinity that can be brought to the forefront of awareness. Like I shared, I think I have my own qualities. I mean, I'm just aware of time, and we are at the end of our session. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to really think about that. I think these conversations on masculinity, I would really love to happen again, and to keep going. My next Instagram Live, you all voted me to do a surprise theme. So who knows what that will be? Maybe it will be something about masculinity. Faz has just said, I feel like awareness of privilege is a great way to start. Yeah, actually, that is a perfect place to start. Being aware of your privilege, what that looks like, what that feels like, and all the different contexts. Yeah, I'm going back into conversation now, and I said I'd be wrapping up. Okay, everyone, you have been so lovely. I'm so happy to see people who have stuck around, people who have jumped in and popped out. If you've just listened, that's been awesome. Thank you so much for listening. Like I said, next time my Instagram live will be at some point in the future. I'm not sure yet, but the theme, we're going to go for a surprise theme. I don't know what that is yet. It's going to be a surprise to me too. But if you do have any desires or needs for me to continue a conversation, then please do let me know. Follow me on Instagram. You can find out when I'll be doing the next live. I'm also on Twitter and Facebook. Thank you for all your thank yous. Oh, I can't wait for the next one. I can't wait either. I'm going to have to find like another bedsheet. All my bedsheets are white. Now this was the most exciting one, really. I'll deliver with the bedsheet. I'll deliver with the theme. I'll deliver with the fun, and I won't be fasting, so this might flow a bit better. Again, Ramadan Mubarak, and I hope you enjoy today. Sorry, I'm a bit rusty on the VSL still, but I will try my best to improve as well. Have a great day and take care of yourselves. Whatever self-care looks like for you, whatever you want to call it, whatever that comes under, I hope you can do one of those things today. Bye bye.